provides, in fact, guarantees to those corporations. It also directly benefits a wide cross-section of the world's transnational corporations in water, energy, oil, gas, telecommunications, automobiles, agribusiness, and the luxury hospitality sectors. Counter to its rather assertive positioning in India and in other countries like ours, that it is essentially an institution that was set up or that evolved into an institution that was dealing with poverty alleviation. As you can see, it has increasingly transited to an institution that is furthering the interests of neoliberal capital. One of the most controversial, one of the most important disputes that it intervened in was a huge project that was in fact filed by a well-known corporation that has subsequently in fact been pulled up on all sorts of corruption charges in Iraq and elsewhere, Bechtel. What's also interesting is that it protects the rights of corporate investors in crucial public interest sectors such as water, electricity, telecommunications, oil, natural gas, and mining. The bank therefore exerts enormous influence on the direction and content of development, research, policy, and action. One of the major concerns that many of us have had all over the world has been the role that it plays in what a friend of ours has called paradigm maintenance. One of the most powerful institutions within the World Bank, arguably the most powerful institution within the World Bank, is under a vice president of the World Bank. It's called the Politico-Economic Vice Presidency, which has now a very large research budget, and that consciously doesn't allow research that is critical to the Washington consensus or the neoliberal agenda. And there have been a number of occasions in which very important economists hired by the bank have been dismissed for questioning this dominant paradigm of the institution. It has also, since Wolfenson's era a few years ago, it has positioned itself. If you look at the Indian country assistance strategy, the country assistance strategy also talks quite extensively about its role as a knowledge provider, in that the bank will now provide substantial research monies to universities, research institutes, independent researchers, and others. And if you look at it in the context of the history of the setting up of the Development Economics Vice Presidency, you see that the research that it has commissioned and it will continue to commission, and the consultancies that it gives to a significant portion of our members of our administrative services and others are in a way part of that process of paradigm maintenance. It's interesting also that in the last several years, last 15-20 years, in response to the growing protests around the world, it has, as I said earlier, it has become much more sophisticated in dealing with dissent, and it has hired both environmentalists and social scientists and sought to integrate them in its various lending projects, and in fact has also therefore now spends substantial amount of its research budgets, about 15 to 20% of its research budgets, on the social, religious and cultural sectors in each of our countries. And in a way that social research or that gender research is then popularized to demonstrate how the World Bank is a caring institution that is concerned about, that is deeply concerned about the issues around the social impacts of development or the intersection between social issues and development. Its primary publication, among the thousands of other papers that are published annually, its primary publication is the World Development Report. Again, you can see, if you see it in practice, how this report has been used to smother, or in a sense at least to dominate the development discourses around the world, both the content and the practice of development. of the vote. Will take the G8, it's more than 50% of the vote. The entire developed world, therefore, controls 62.13% of the vote in the World Bank. What's interesting here is that the countries and the people who face the most adverse impacts of this institution have the least voting power within the institution. 47 countries of Africa are represented only by 2 directors. Each of the developed world, each of the G8 have one executive director.